Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome. Can you hear us well? Me well? Yes. So we thought we would start with the inspiration, which is John Cage and his work Indeterminacy. And we'll just talk briefly about that. This started in 1958 as a lecture. One first in Darmstadt and then the next in Brussels, and it became a recording. And in the beginning it was it had always been 1 minute stories. The first version was 30 minutes, and then it became a 90-minute version. And John Cage would read these stories, some written, some found, in 1 minute. Some would be very wordy, and he'll have to rush through them, no punctuation, and then some would be very short. And you know what I mean. And then later on, David Tudor joined in, right? You want to add to that, David Tudor's part in Indeterminacy, which is very much related to his part, which you'll talk about later on.
Okay. Sure. So they decided to, Cage just had Tudor play some of his, they made a recording, and Cage had Tudor play some of his electronic music from a piece he was working on called Fontana Mix. He was working on in Italy at the time, and some piano music from a piano and orchestra piece that he had recently composed as well. And for the purposes of this recording, they were in different rooms and had no relationship to one another that was intentional.
So sometimes John Cage's words would be obscured by the sound that David Tudor was making. So fast forward to 2011-ish. So this piece premiered in 2012 in January at Peak Performances, Montclair State University. So around 2011, beginning of that, Bill wanted to make a work for himself. That was the beginning, right? He hadn't been on stage with the company since 2006, I think. And he wanted to go back on stage without hurting his knees or his back. So he thought he would take a page from John Cage, sit at a desk, and read stories in 1 minute. He started writing stories. So John Cage became his mentor, his teacher, and also someone that he would push back against and challenge himself and challenge what John Cage proposed. At the same time, one of the important ideas was chance procedure. But then, around that time, we were offered a commission by Montclair State University for new company work. So what would your new company work be? So this solo work became Storytime, a full company piece. And we started working on it. The first rehearsals, we always like to say that this piece we started ass backwards, because we started in a TV studio in Phoenix, Arizona, around April, is that right? Around April of 2011. Why were we in a TV studio? Let's not go into that, right? No, let's not go into that.
Since it didn't result in anything that you'll see, no need to go there.
That's not true. But we had the full crew, we had a film crew in there, and that was our very first rehearsal. That's not how you do things usually. You go and make material and develop the piece first. But there I think we learned a few things. One of them is that we're going to subject everything to chance procedure. What stories are read when, what material, what dance material will be danced by whom and when and where. I think the seed of the set design was planted then. Would you say that, Bjorn? We had the boxes there, and there's a lighting unit that you'll see on stage that came from that period. It's called the Kino Flow. It's very much TV studio lighting. And we decided to go through our history and just pull out excerpts, 1 minute excerpts of dance material. But it's also what the dancers had in their bodies, because we just jumped into the studio with no material prepared. So what was in our repertoire at the time was Responding to New Hope, and the Body Against Body program, which is a lot of duets, and the music program we're working on. So we excerpted from those programs and began creating a menu. We call it menu, and we kept adding to the menu, and then we would spin from that. By spinning, in the beginning, Kyle Mott then stage manager, who's now our our director of producing and touring. Yes. She and 6-year-old Mika made this wheel that looks like a little wheel of fortune with a hairpin in it, and they spun our options. And then we outgrew that very quickly, and we used random.org. So I'm going to pass this on to Bjorn.
A couple of complementary things, I think. The prior full evening length work was Fondly Do We Hope, Fervently Do We Pray, and at the end of this major piece, which was commissioned by had been commissioned by the Ravinia Festival to mark the 200th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, and which included an actor, singer's text. Bill had what he describes himself as a bit of a crisis, how to move on from there and what to do. And Cage offered a wonderful permission, the permission in a way which I think became a philosophy for Cage, to remove personal choices and taste to a certain point, because like Bill, Cage cheated sometimes, to remove personal taste and choices from determining creation, order, and narrative and sequences. So hence the spinning idea or the chance procedure. To make it a little more graphic for you to understand, there is 33 years of choreographic movement, more if you include the works that predate the company, which when Bill and Arnie were doing duets together, that the company has to a large extent in its body, and which accrues daily in class. Janet makes wonderful phrases that the dancers learn as well. There are 181 stories. 4 stories were added today, as a matter of fact. So there are 181 stories to date that Bill has written. A selection of these you can see here. There is Ted's music. There are 12 square on the stage, and there are 9 dancers. So what we mean when we say chance procedure, we mean that movement such and such can come in minute 43 to story 150, number 153, which will be accompanied by some musical sound interventions that Ted on his side spins out of his selection of musics. The dancers receive on the day of the performance what Janet referred to as the menu, and you will see that they have on the side crib sheets, because obviously it's very difficult for them to memorize. And each dancer on that menu discovers what is the movement that he or she will do at what minute to what story, and then the music happens. They don't know in advance what it will be. So this gives you an idea of the system at work. I designed the set, and for Bill it's very important that sets be not just decorative elements to illustrate something. Sometimes we have arguments about that, but that's his approach. And so the grid, which has been recurring in a few works over the last few years, is a good tool for Bill, because when starting a work, Bill often comes to me and says, what do you think we should do for a set? And I say, well, I think that my role as a set designer is to come after you've created a work and do something that is appropriate. It's not my role really, as I see it, to come in a vacuum. But creating this grid, which started when Bill did a solo in the Cathedral of Milan, and gave him a structure for the solo, moving from square number 1 to 2 to 3 and so on, a kind of geography, if you want, a map. That grid has been used in various pieces, and you will see it tonight again, since it allows Bill and the dancers and Janet to have this geography to move through, and then you will see there are other set elements that were added and that a crew will sit in the center of the stage, reads the stories, the dance happens around him.
What are the screens about?
The screens...
How did that come about?
That's a very good question, which I have no idea. Where did it come from? I think it was an idea, again, a division of the stage. Dividing the stage in a translucent way, but creating a remove and, again, a variation. So you will see two screens that appear at a certain point. Again, the set elements appear at randomly chosen moment. Obviously, you will realize that there are certain things that have to be taken into account. If you have a couch, which there is, or an armchair in square number so-and-so, and when spinning, Janet comes up with the dance happening in that square at that time, Janet has to readjust things to make them work. If a dancer exits from right and is expected the next minute to the next immediate thing to enter from left, it needs to be adjusted. So there are adjustments, and there are some moments in the structure, again for diversity's sake, and you will recognize these easily, where the dance actually illustrates what is being read by Dale. When those moments occur is randomly sequenced, but the combination that you see at that moment is meant to be, is predetermined, is not random combination.
So can we, I was going to, we gave you all our secrets, right? I'm going to say that later and introduce Ted first. So jumping backwards, after our first residency in the TV studio, somewhere between that and our next residency, we had a panel discussion in University of Virginia in Charlottesville, and Ted was one of the panelists, and that's where we found this person, this wonderful person, and we invited him to be a collaborator. And the panel was, can you talk about your work too?
Sure. Check. Yes, so the panel was chance indeterminacy in the creative process. And I'm a composer, but I'm a professor at the University of Virginia in the program in composition and computer technologies. I make acoustic and electronic work, often use technology. And I studied from a young age, among other people, Christian Wolff, who's now the only surviving person from the New York school. So Cage, Feldman, Wolff, Earl Brown, and Tudor. I mean, Tudor's like the fifth honorary member. Anyway, so that's why I was on this panel, because Bill was interested in exploring, talking with other people who knew about this part of history and this set of ideas. So I'll just say about my work, particularly in this piece, that as the choreography reaches back into the history of this company and further, I have recordings of my own music in the collection of music that I can draw from. As is true of the choreography and the stories, I have much more music available to me than I use in any particular performance. The music could be things that I wrote that musicians played and then recorded, or electronic things that I play myself, environmental sounds, and then and things that we made that are thematically tied to stories and to bits of movement in the piece that aren't, again, I spin my stuff too, so there's a lot of discontinuity or non-correspondence, or in general I would say that correspondence modulates like this, so that sometimes there's great correspondence and other times there's not. But there are these resonances that speak throughout the span of the work, and in some sequences those are more pronounced than others. So some performances are just more incoherent, and some are more coherent, basically. And then I'll just say that in terms of the way that I deploy the sound in the performance, as you'll hear, I I have a score also that's done for performance, where I write in what I have to do, and I made these applications that allow me to do this with I have a couple computers and lots of tech stuff and microphones, but I make it so that it's basically pretty hard for me to do, so that you could make that so that you press a button and then sit back and watch the show, but I try to make it to set that so that it's difficult, that I have to concentrate and that I can mess up, which is actually an important threshold. I want to have the possibility of making mistakes, and by golly, I do. And then finally, the thing I would say is that I also have some programs that when I hit something, some sound comes out, but I'm not sure precisely what it's going to be. So I use randomness. I use computer randomness in real time in that way, and I also use the I Ching, which is the Cage's method of one of his methods of creating randomness, in order to get not only when to do certain things, but also the I Ching has it has mood, like openness. It has adjectives that go with each hexagram that are suggestive, that recommend relationships to other things that are going on.
So, yeah. I was just going to say that, as you can see, there are a lot of elements pulled together, and it always starts with the choreography. The sequence is spun from the dance first. It's given to the tech. The lighting also is subject to chance procedure. And then it's given to Ted. The stories are spun new every night. As you can see, we have 5 sequences in these 2 weeks. 35 is our first sequence, but tonight we just made some changes. So if you had been here on the first or the second night, it's slightly different on the third night. We just changed internally. And tomorrow we have a whole different sequence with our guest, Catherine Wong, and sharing the mic with Bill. And
she's a first.
She's the first, yeah, first time we've ever had a guest share with Bill. And the next week, we're going to make changes to the whole set. You knew that, right? Yes. And yeah, you have to come back next week. We have 3 different sequences next week. And you can imagine how difficult it is for the dancers. They usually get their sequence on the day of, in the afternoon of, and they find out what they're doing, what furniture to move when and where, not just the material to dance. And there will be mistakes. And there are always mistakes. You never make the minutes. Some minutes are linked together, so that when this event is spun, the whole 3 minutes will follow it. And a lot of things are, and then you notice the crafted moments, as Bjorn was saying. The crafted moments, we call them that, are moments where everything syncs together. Lights, sound, story, movement. There are only a few of those.
2 more philosophical things. First, observing Bill. It's very interesting because as a director, choreographer, Bill's tendency is to create dramatic art. Obviously, the system which is at work here is disconnected from dramatic arts as we understand them. So at the beginning, there would be Bill and Janet talking about whether that story which had been spun to occur at the beginning was dramatically good. And part of the cheating was changing the order of the menu in order to fit taste and personal dramatic experience. The stories I'm talking about, yes. As time has gone by, greater trust has been given to what is chance. And what is very interesting, I have observed, being old bystander from the audience, the run of the piece, and seen every show. No two are obviously alike. And yet, through this system of absolute chance, you will notice recurrences and connections that you make. Sometimes very surprising when we have a question and answer with the audience. We hear comments afterwards and connections that are made by the audience that surprise us, because it is something like nature, and I think that is in a way what Cage was after. Nature is the result of seemingly absolute random coalescence of events that shape what we see, and yet it always works.
And where does the taste come in?
And the taste, well, in a way, it's interesting, and that's more musicologically speaking. Cage was against improvisation. He felt that when you improvise, you fall back on what you know. You fall back on what you like. Hence, Cage would never consider himself an improviser. He used the I Ching and other devices for randomness, to create randomness in arcs of performances. Taste is related to what I just said, and it's a fight between taste and allowing things to occur, but both Cage and Bill cheat sometimes.
But I also think that maybe what events we choose, what excerpt we choose to put into our menu is our taste, and what parameters we apply towards the chance procedure is also a taste, is a controlling device, I think. Like we used to have more of those rules that this event can never happen before this event, and now we keep breaking them. We were talking to a bunch of students yesterday after the show from NYU Tisch, and one of them asked me, he said, wow, there were some moments that were breathtaking. Do you ever say to yourself, you and Bill, let's repeat that, let's keep that and do that again next time? I said, no, we don't. We go, wow, and then we let it go. It's a good practice, isn't it? Yeah.
Should we open for questions?
Yeah. Do you have any comments or questions?
Well, for me, it's just that. So you are set, you are music, and you are a light designer.
No, I'm not. I'm everybody. No. I'm the associate artistic director, so I would be in charge of the dance part, and I'm just housekeeper, I think. So I would say that in this piece, I have the most important part because I make the sequence, and it takes me hours to make one.
And Janet is quite modest. She also makes beautiful movement phrases that before every performance, and when we're in rehearsal a number of times a week, there are classes which the dancers are required to take, which Janet leads, and during which she creates movement phrases that are very often much appreciated by Bill and incorporated into the final work.
And actually, all the dancers. Bill doesn't dance anymore. He likes to say when we dance in private. And the dancers are all fierce movement makers. So for tonight's sequence, so our sequence will comprise of the earliest materials from 1979. The company was formed in 1982. And the latest material may be a phrase from class this afternoon. So you can imagine. And it's the hardest piece to rehearse. They're rehearsing unrelated events. You know what I'm saying? If you're a dancer, you probably know. And it's kind of scary. Sometimes you are booked. They would say, I'm booked for 12 minutes. I have to memorize 12 minutes of material on the day of. So they get lost and their friends will help them, or
they mess up.
They see a group over there. Why are they all over there? Oh, I should be over there too. You know.
This randomness is not.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on what you were saying about the impact of taste?
The impact of taste. This exercise, chance procedure, allows us to move away from our own taste, because after making work for so many years, we either fall into our own habits, our own tastes, and this allows us to fall back on it. And what our safety is the material we choose. And we learned early on that if we put, even if we kept changing minute by minute by minute, a lot of changes, it becomes monotonous. So how do we put menu items in there that has already this and this and this built into it, so that no matter how I spin it, and we have added a lot of new material for this run, that it will give us a kind of satisfying experience. That's how I would say it. Yeah. And you had something to say?
I was just thinking that this randomness, this is more an internal methodology, but me as an audience, when I saw this for the first time without this knowledge about the construction of the piece is a set piece, watch it from outside. So
Why
to
bother?
have a better perception of the piece, I have to see it several times.
Well, would you ask?
Well, I would suggest that you come and see it sometime. The ticket office is here. I'm joking, but you know, there is something that is actually indeed, I find, and my opinion is obviously 100% objective, but I do find that there is something that is gained by seeing the piece a number of times, because you meet things that you've seen before, but in contexts that are vastly different and that shed a very different light on what you experience and how you experience it.
And I would like to say that I hope that when you watch it, it doesn't look like a hot mess. They don't know what they're doing. That you don't have to know that it's random, but it changes their body and their chemistry and their psyche, and one of the things, I remember this was what, New Year's, Bill and I were talking, New Year's right before our premiere, and we had just brought back into the mix, it's a month before the premiere, this is December 31st, January 1st of the next year, and Bill and I were talking on the phone. He was in New Mexico, you guys were in New Mexico, and I was in New York, and Bill, we called each other and said, Happy New Year, blah, 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 and New Year's wish, Bill said something, and I said to Bill, well, my New Year's wish is that this piece stays fresh and urgent, and to keep this proposition of chance procedure alive throughout the life of this piece.
And also speaking with the dancers, it's interesting because it's impossible for them to fall into complacency.
Yeah.
When we have pieces that tour for a long time, what saves those pieces from complacency is Bill's sometimes infuriating tendency to never stop messing with the piece. I mean, the piece in my 20-some year with the company, I have seen no piece that was ever frozen into something immutable, no piece of Bill's. And so here, the messing that keeps the dancers on point happens daily. And they are on point, they have no choice. And I think they love it from speaking with them. It's a challenge that really keeps them excited with the work.
Did you want to
Got time for one more question?
One more question.
Yeah, what exactly is this cheating you speak of? How does the cheating happen?
Well, as we speak, Bill is in his dressing room or in his office upstairs with the book which Carly, our stage manager, has put together, in which are selections of those stories according to what Janet spun. So
Carly spins those, and his stories change every night, even though the choreography may stay the same for 2 or 3 shows.
So Bill is sitting there, and he has his stopwatch as he rehearses. He's reading them within the minute allocated to each piece. But he also sometimes will say, you know, this story, I realize, is going to happen at the time when Ted is doing what we call the whiteout, which you will meet at a certain point. It changes when, but always, but which is a point when Ted's sound wall obliterates the story.
Give it all away.
Well, you know, and Bill will say, you know, I'm really attached to this story, and I hate it that the audience will not hear it. So he may move the story out of page 53 and put it into page 22. You know, that's what I mean, cheating. Yeah.
But tonight, I said to Bill, just so you know, this story is at risk. And he said, I'm not going to worry about that. That's fine. We'll sacrifice. I'm not going to worry about it. So he goes, you know, we're just in this negotiation between applying taste and letting it go, which is a really interesting process.
And that's been changing throughout the run since 2012. We've been
become
letting
more
go
relaxed,
more
letting go, allowing things to happen.
To trust the universe.
Yeah, really.
That's a closing line.
That is the closest one. Trust the universe. On that note, I need to trust all of you lovely folks to help.